Radio DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Radio, South Central States. I'm Nathan Russell, and I'm joined here by my co-host for today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Arnie.
All right.
Just go by Arnie.
And we're here in Blue Ridge, Texas, actually, to discuss road trips. And today we're going to talk about our top 5 list for tips for taking road trips. So I understand you've taken some road trips in your time.
I've taken a couple of road trips when we were kids. There are 6 of us in the family, so flying is not feasible. So we did a lot of road trips. We did anything from going from Northern California to Southern California, driving along the coast of California, and then going all the way up to Canada.
And for me, I've been taking a family trip every summer where we would get into a vehicle and we would take large road trip loops. It would take like a week in order to undertake it. We would camp the whole way. Like we wouldn't stay in hotels or anything. So we do have a little bit of experience between us when it comes to road trips. And we just like to share some of the tips that we've learned, I guess, over the years. But we're going to start with the question of the day because we love hearing from our live chat. And that is, what is the longest road trip you have ever taken? Okay, what about you? What's the longest road trip you've ever taken?
I think the longest one we did take was the one from Sacramento all the way up to Canada. We went to Vancouver and Victoria. I know we did road trips to Colorado, but we were kids, so I really don't remember that one. But the ones going to Oregon, Washington, Canada, that I do remember.
Okay, yeah, we're next to a major highway. I don't know if they heard of motorcycle going by. Oh, there goes another one. But maybe he's going on a road trip. But actually in Blue Ridge, we're kind of out here in the countryside here in Texas. About an hour and a half road trip to get here. But we're talking about maybe more extended road trips. So my longest road trip I've taken, I took a loop starting in Fort Worth, and we drove up through Ohio, through Michigan. We crossed into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So if you're not aware, Michigan has 2 parts. They got the main part here, and then they got I don't know the correct geographic terms, but they got another part. It's 2 separate states, but it's one state. You cross a bridge to go into the northern part, and there's like hardly anything up there. But then we crossed in through Minnesota, across the Dakotas, down Wyoming, down Colorado, and me and my son camped the whole way. That's been the longest trip that I've taken on the road. So learned quite a bit on the road too. So let's go ahead and get started though. So I'll start with my first tip when it comes to road taking road trips. And that's being organized. Okay. So especially if you're camping and you have all this gear, you're going to have your clothes, you're going to have your food, you're going to have your camping gear. You want to make sure that every time you unpack it, you repack it and you organize it. And the point I'm trying to make is I've taken a road trip before where when we were done camping, it was let's just throw it all into the truck and we'll just deal with it later because we got a truck, we got all the space. But then when we had to go and unpack everything, especially if it would be at night, it'd be hard to find things, or if it started raining, like you're panicking, you can't find things, especially after you've been driving for several hours and you're trying to find something. It just makes it unpleasant. And when it comes to really long road trips, you want to try to make sure that you don't up your stress unnecessarily, because at the same time you're going on vacation. It should be something that you're enjoying. So staying organized, that's on my list. What about you? What do you got?
My first one is set ground rules. Okay, so for ground rules, if my ground rule is 1, if I'm driving, I get to pick the radio. I get to choose the music. I get to choose entertainment. And because, hey, I need to stay awake. So my other ground rule is whoever gets shotgun, whoever sits in the front, They have to stay awake the whole trip. They can't be falling asleep on me because I used to go on road trips and my sister would sit in the front and then she'd be sleeping and snoring and then that would make me tired. So I'm like, nope. I get to do the music and then I get to whoever's in the front has to stay awake. And my nephews would make fun of me like, what kind of music is that? I'm like, that's a music that's gonna keep me awake. So set ground
Exactly.
rules.
Oh yeah, I can respect that. That the one driving, you want to make sure that they're accommodated the most because they're doing the work at the time. Typically, if at least when I'm in the passenger seat, I agree, stay awake as much as possible. But what you call it, navigator. Do you ever do a navigator rule?
I used to when we used to have maps on
Hmm.
paper when we didn't have maps on our phone. And
Right.
so, yes, I would be the navigator because sometimes people couldn't read the maps. They're just looking at it one way and they don't understand. It could be going the other way. So, yes, I used to navigate when we had road maps.
You know what? You bring up a very interesting point too about the paper maps because I'm so used to using like uh, my phone basically to navigate. And I can't remember what it was like before that because I know I've done it. I was like, how did I drive like across the country without my phone? And you would print out maps for one, which is kind of scary because if you take a wrong turn, you're like, where am I?
Hmm.
So I'd always try to have like a miniature map to go with the directions. But then sometimes roads just don't exist anymore
Yeah.
or things aren't updated. So I've been actually surprised, like how did we used to travel?
Like in the not so distant past where they actually had maps like online, and so like you said, you'd do the directions and then you'd print it out. But there was a time where they didn't have online at all, where you literally had to unfold a big piece of paper
Oh,
that was the map of
yeah.
where you're going.
And you could never fold it back together.
No, you cannot. And then it had like one side is the one big map, and then on the other side is like little, like a close up of
Oh, right,
certain
right, yeah.
areas. Otherwise, you'd have to do the whole big map, and then you'd have to have a map for each city so that you can go to where you need to go. I remember that.
Now, am I to my second point?
Not yet.
Not yet. Is
What
it
is your
yours?
second point?
It's
No,
mine.
no, I've only done my first, so it's your second one.
My second. All right, we're losing track of time a
What's
little
your
bit.
second
All
one?
right, actually, just to transition nicely into what we are talking about maps, have backup navigation.
Hmm.
Okay, and the reason why I say this is, especially if you're traveling really, really far away from where you live, your phone provider might not be servicing that area, which is what I found out in Michigan. That I was roaming the whole time.
Hmm.
I didn't have to pay for it, but if this was 10 years ago, I definitely would have had to pay for that data. But when you're roaming, they do limit how much data you can roam with. And so when I was in the middle of nowhere in Michigan, that
Hmm.
data ran out.
Hmm.
So the map just wouldn't load.
And that's why whenever I do the map, I'll put it on my phone and then I'll take screenshots just to be safe.
Right.
Especially like when I go out of the country and I don't have service when I'm traveling, I'll look for my directions and then I'll do screenshots on the phone. So then at least I still have the step by step somehow.
And I found out that there are apps that will work independent of your phone signal. You
Yes.
have to download, you can download the states
Yes.
and it will download that entire state's roadway. It's not the best navigation. Your
Hmm.
GPS will always work
Hmm.
no matter where you're at.
Hmm.
So, but if you don't have signal, you could switch over to a backup app. But your phone might die also. So you should always have like a paper map.
Hmm.
It's always good to have, especially if it's a long road trip. In that particular case, when I ran out of signal completely and I didn't have a backup,
Hmm.
I just knew, all right, I know in Michigan there is a interstate running
Hmm.
north south. I just need to keep going across the state until I hit it. And then when I hit it, and I went up, I guess because typically around interstates they maintain some of the signal in most places, so I was able to get signal again. But yeah, that's my second point. Make sure you have a backup to navigate. What about you? What you got next?
The other one is read the signs, because especially if you're driving in the middle of nowhere where they may not be any stops nearby, you got to read the signs. Okay, when's the next rest stop? When's the next place where you can go get food or go get gas? Because sometimes you'll see signs where it'll say, okay, no gas for another 120 miles. So you better make sure you go get your gas before you hit that point. So I think it's really important to read signs and know what next civilization is going to be coming up.
You actually bring up a really good point about that too, because when you're out west, we're talking uh, Arizona,
Hmm.
New Mexico, those places. You're right. Like those, like civilization could be like hundreds of miles apart.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at a map and saying like, well, there's a town here,
Hmm.
so let me just wait until I get to that town and I'll gas up. You go there and like, there's not a town here. It's just an intersection.
Yes.
There's no town. There's no houses. There's nobody.
Exactly. And so when we used, like I said, we drove California, north and south. So there's parts of the area where you really wouldn't have places that you could go. But I really found this out when I actually did my road trip from California to move to Texas. And I'm like, okay, it's you're just like nothing for so long. And I'm like, am I gonna have enough gas? Am I
Yeah.
gonna make it where I'm supposed to go? And so reading the signs is really helpful.
We have a few comments. I don't know if you want to go ahead and read those.
Yeah, so we have Victor Novello who is greeting us, saying good morning from, oh, he's from here, from Blue Ridge. How nice is that? And then we also have Melanie who's greeting us. She is from Fort Worth. And she said back in 2011, she drove straight from Colorado to Houston. Okay. And we have Renz Diaz also making a comment saying his longest trip was going to Washington, D.C. I believe that was from Fort Worth. So, yeah. And, mhm.
I think we have a tip there. Okay, so Melanie, her tip is bring snacks to avoid overpaying at gas stations. And it helps keep you awake too. Pick out some music and podcasts in advance. Yep, very important to download to your device in case you lose signal. Very good point about snacks.
Mhm.
Is that one of yours?
That's my next one.
All right, let's roll into it then.
So my next one is you have to bring snacks because first of all, you don't know how many rest stops or gasoline stations you're going to come across. And when you're driving and you're sleepy, I found out that if you're munching on things, it takes the sleepiness away and you can go a few more hours. And so I like to have different types of snacks. I got to have something savory, something sweet. And then, of course, you got to have a cooler of drinks because I can't drink beverages if they're hot.
Right.
So,
And as far as like saving money, like these sports drinks, I have a generic blue one. Okay, since we're not sponsored by any sports drink, but like when I got this at the store, this was 88 cents. If
mhm.
I were to buy this at a gas station, it would be close to $3.
Yes.
So very good point that you do want to try to buy most of the snacks that you want ahead of time, but you really should leave room for like local snacks.
Hmm.
Okay, especially here in Texas, they're very proudful of like the snacks and their local food.
Hmm.
So you got to partake in those too, because you don't always get the opportunity to try local fare, and it's not always widely available.
That's true.
So my next point, let's see, I kind of went out of order just to transition nicely, but don't drive at night slash when you may be tired. Now I know some people they do prefer to drive at night just because there's no traffic and whatnot. But the context I'm talking about is like let's say you've been road tripping all day. When nighttime comes, you should really think about stopping. Uh, Even if like it's only like 7, 8 o'clock at night,
Hmm.
okay, not that dark out. Once it starts getting dark, your body just naturally starts switching modes into wanting to sleep. And if you're tired and exhausted, the lights going into your eyes from like passing cars, it does not help. So I just learned like when you map out your routes, typically try to just limit it to maybe 8 hours at the most if you start in the morning,
Hmm.
and then stop and plan to stop and rest. Like
Hmm.
really get your rest for safety reasons above all, but also because at the same time you're on a road trip. It should be something enjoyable.
Yeah. So, and I guess it is a purpose of your road trip. So, if it is vacation, then yes, I normally would go during the day and enjoy the sights and everything. But when it's one of those things where you're just trying to get from point A to point B, when I used to drive from Northern California to Southern California all the time, I did prefer to drive at night because, first of all, there's no traffic, and the big rigs. There's very few big rigs driving at nighttime, so I like that. And you could, even though you shouldn't, you could speed a little bit because there's nobody on the road. And so I enjoy, and I'm a night person. So
Mhm.
I think I do better at nighttime than I do in the morning. If I do the road trips at 6 in the morning. I'm half awake, but if I could do it at nighttime, I'm usually wide awake. So
And when you talk about speeding, Texas does have high speed limits, but when you're driving out in the country, do not speed when you come across small towns. Those small towns, like you'll be, and we're talking about like 75-mile-per-hour speed limits on just the highways, not even interstate, just the highways. And it'll drop all the way to 45. When it drops to 45, make sure you are going exactly 45. Because in those small towns, the only revenue they probably get is from catching speeders, and they will catch you if you're speeding. So just something to keep in mind. But I'll go to my next point, and that is keep some tools. Okay,
oh,
keep
that's a
some
good
tools
one.
in your vehicle. Maybe you're not too mechanically inclined, but you can keep things such as like zip ties, duct tape. Zip ties, you can do like very minor repairs. So let's say something hit the bottom of your car and you got something dragging. Well, you can zip tie that up real quick, just to get you back onto the road, up and going. Same with like duct tape, you can fix a lot of things with that. But one thing I also highly recommend is a tire pump. So
Yes.
they sell them. You can go find your favorite online retailer. They sell online. They sell the pumps. Sometimes you get a deal. You can get them for like 20 bucks. 20 bucks, and it plugs into your power outlet, and you can pump up your tire. So, and pumping your tire is pretty simple. I mean, if it's low, unscrew the cap, you screw in the tire pump, and a lot of them are actually programmed to shut off automatically when they hit a certain psi. Okay, just basic info. You can find that info in your door sill. They'll tell you how much air pressure you can put inside of that.
Yeah.
Now, you can also get more elaborate and get a car jumper kit. So you would have to charge this large unit. Usually there's a tire pump and also a jumper kit in case your battery dies. You can at least get that jumped. And if you're on a long road trip and you're having battery problems, when you get that car started, you get that car going, try not to stop the car because your batteries is mostly being used when you're starting it up, but then the
Mhm,
alternator uses the power of the engine to power the car.
mhm.
So just something to keep in mind.
And we have a few more tips from Victor Novello. He said you should sleep well and be ready for everything. And this is one tip that I find interesting from Renz Diaz. He says someone should annoy you when you get sleepy. But I think sometimes kids just annoy you whether you're sleepy or not, right? And then I just want to give a shout out to the Johnson family who is greeting us from Jacksonville. So his longest trip was from Jacksonville to California. So that is good. And then Christian also said, "Don't forget your charging cords,"
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
true. Um, and especially it depends on the different types of phones you have because not everyone may have the same type of phone. So you want to make sure you have cords for everybody. But my next tip is have co-pilots.
Co-pilots. Okay.
So sometimes when you do a road trip and you're the only one driving, it can get really tiring. So I'm very fortunate whenever I do road trips with my sisters, at least we could all drive. Some of them can't drive as long as I can. Like after 2 hours, they're like, okay, we're done. We need a switch. But being able to switch drivers is very useful. And I'm glad that my nephew Riley actually moved to Southern California. And so now he's learning to do the long drives. When he got his license, we're like, yeah, we got another driver, which I think is a really good thing. So you got to have co-pilots.
I agree. So, like, when I take trips, especially with my family, usually I'm the one who's doing the majority of the driving. And then if I get too sleepy, my wife will take over. And she actually mentioned in the comments when she drove from Colorado to Texas, that was all her because I had gotten too tired at that point. Um, and I expected actually her to stop, but she literally drove straight from Colorado all the way to Texas. I think it was 16 hours, 17 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I think women have more stamina to stay awake than the male because seriously, I can go on road trips and drive. I drove California to Texas all by myself, but yeah,
How long does that take, by the way?
so I did it in a course of 2 days and a half. So
Mhm.
because I stopped. Well, I got stranded in a snowstorm for about 8 hours. So I literally was not moving. We are like inch by inch. And so that took longer than expected. Because my plan was to leave California, get at least towards the end of Arizona. and then make it to Texas in at least 2 days. But because of the snowstorm, I ended up barely getting out of California by the time nighttime hit. So I was like at the border of California and Arizona. And then from there, went from there all the way to Odessa. And then from Odessa, finished it off.
You actually bring a really good point about weather to consider. And here in South Central states, the weather can get wild right about this time of the year. I think we've already seen some pretty wild weather, being in Tornado Alley. And that's kind of where South Central state sits at the end of. We go all the way up to Wichita, so we do encompass that. But around May and June, when there's that transition between cool weather to warm weather, the thunderstorms get very, very active in that region. And me and my son found out that the hard way. So like every night it seemed like it was thunderstorming, and every time we were driving, we were trying to avoid major thunderstorms. Even like I remember we were driving up into Michigan, we got hit by a thunderstorm, and it was so bad. The wind was sideways. And I was telling my son, "Hey, look out the window. Make sure you don't see like a tornado forming because everything's going sideways right now." And same with the camping, we had to account for that. So I had a rooftop tent on my truck, and you don't want to be on your rooftop when there's a thunderstorm. And that did happen to me. A thunderstorm hit, and I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm not staying here because thunder's really, really loud when you're outside.
It is. I mean, it's loud when you're inside. Imagine when you're outside. But yeah.
All right. So
What's your next one?
I think we're coming up on our last points.
I'm on my last one.
Yes. So I have be comfortable.
Oh man, you just stole mine.
Well, I guess we can both talk about it. So I guess we're going to close out. How did that work out? Huh? So be comfortable. So, just talking about the thunderstorms, that's very uncomfortable. So really invest in, especially if you're going to be camping or sleeping in your car, invest in being able to sleep really, really well. You need to be able to recharge, but also while you're driving, make sure your seat settings are good. You don't want to pack things in the vehicle to where maybe your legs would be cramped, so you want to account for that also. What are your thoughts on being comfortable?
My comfort is your clothes when you're, because, when people like to go out, they like to get all dressed up and everything. But on road trips, you have to be comfy because you're going to be sitting there for a long period of time. And then also, like, if it gets, in our car, people like the different temperatures. I like it really cold. And so, we will bring blankets, small blankets or something for everyone else who thinks it's too cold. And then depending on what side you're driving on, a lot of times the sun is on my side. And so it's beating down on you. So I bring like some type of sweater or something just to cover my arms and my legs so that they don't burn. And then when you have to go down, even though you're in comfy clothes, it might not be the best attire, but hey, at least you're comfy when you're driving.
I do like to travel on like gym shorts, gym clothes, stuff like that. Especially because most of the trips I take are going to be in the summer, so it's going to be really hot out. Also to account for that, for like the sun. Have a blanket with you because even though you may have the AC blasted, the sunlight coming in
Yes.
can be brutal on your skin, and you'll still feel that heat. But like when it comes to like camping, what I've learned is to bring multiple methods of sleep. What I mean by that is when I would car camp on my road trips, I'd bring a hammock and I'd bring a tent with me every time. And I'd bring an inflatable mattress. Now, I know when you're camping, some people kind of look down on that, but it's like, hey, it's sleep.
It's still camping.
I'm here to enjoy myself. So if I can sleep on an air mattress and have the best sleep of my night, I'm going to do it. Even though maybe some of the people who are with me are like, no, you got to rough it. I'm going to sleep on the ground. And no, I'm not doing that. I'm on vacation. No. My time off is important.
Yeah. And comfy also has to include your footwear. For me, I cannot drive in shoes. It does not matter what kind of shoe it is. I cannot drive in shoes. I have to drive in flip-flops. So I will always have flip-flops. But then depending on where I'm going, like when I was doing my road trip here, I knew I was going to hit snow. So I made sure I had shoes nearby so that when I exited the vehicle, at least I would be in shoes. But no, I got to drive in flip-flops.
I think just be careful if you remove your shoes that they're not in a position where they could slide underneath your pedals.
Yes. So I put it on the passenger side.
Right.
But
so actually, I think it's actually illegal to drive barefoot in some places.
Is it really?
I think so. I heard that from somewhere. I know it was in Florida. I think when I first heard that, which is kind of weird because it's like
Yeah, why
when
would you?
when you're in Florida and you're at the beach and you get sand and everything, you just come out of the water. It's like, no, I'm taking my shoes off. I'm gonna drive barefoot. It's not ideal. You'll notice that, like, oh wow, the pedals are a lot further away.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not sure why the thing. Maybe it's just pedal feel. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I don't know. Like I said, I have to be in flip flops when I drive.
Now, I actually saw a good suggestion here
From who?
from Melanie
Okay.
saying keep a first aid kit with you.
Oh, and Freggy said the same thing.
So, first aid. I do carry lots of different types of first aid kits. I did take a class in Stop the Bleed, so I do have more of the advanced things.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're readily available, you really should get training for those type of things. But for like a basic kit, band-aids, uh, antibacterial ointment,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe some bigger wrap bandages, and
Mm-hmm.
that could cover, like 90% of, maybe the little mishaps you might
Yeah.
have.
And then Freggy, Andres also said, have extra clothes packed that you can access easily rather than opening your luggage. And I think that's a good idea because when we go on a road trip, can you imagine? There's three adult females usually and two teenage boys. Everyone has their own suitcase. And the way it's packed, it's like strategically packed in the back, where if you're going to take one out, you're going to have to take out a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think having clothes that's easily accessible, I think that is such a great idea.
I agree too. I actually keep two T-shirts and a hoodie in my car at all times. There was actually a time when my wife, she was like, "Oh, I'm cold. I forgot to bring a jacket." I was like, "Oh, I got you covered. I got a hoodie in my back." And there was another time when I fell into a creek and got real wet,
Hmm.
and I was able to change my clothes. So, yeah, I agree with that. Bring extra clothes.
Yeah, and then we have somebody else watching, Ron Pobletti. He is from the District of Mountain States. I actually know who he is, and he does a lot of road trips. He's got an RV that he takes out on his road trips. And he just actually came from a road trip from Las Vegas to Yellowstone National Park, passing through Wyoming, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho. That is pretty cool. He actually has a lot of pictures of his travels, and it's so fascinating.
Utah is very underrated for road trips. You know that little corner piece?
Hmm.
So we drove through there and it looked like the earth, like parts of the earth were like ripped out of the ground and almost placed vertically. It was a very wild place to be.
Hmm.
And it's like, I'd never seen that. You never, there's a lot of places that you can take road trips to. Like he mentioned, like Yellowstone,
Hmm.
which are widely known, but there's a lot of places like in between that don't really get a whole lot of attention that will really blow your mind if you
Hmm.
take a road trip, especially through like Colorado and whatnot.
So I missed out because I did do a road trip from Southern California to Salt Lake City. But like I said, we left 9 o'clock at night. So we really didn't see anything. We left at night. By the time we got to Salt Lake, it was day. And, we didn't see anything that we were passing by, which I kind of regret. But,
Right.
it was one of those things where we had to because we're just getting off work and we couldn't travel during the day. We had to be there at a certain time. So that's one thing I wish I could have done. We have a sister. We have Jennifer here from Trinidad, from the local of Long Beach, Orange County, California. She says her longest trip was from Anaheim to Wyoming and Texas. So I think that is a long trip.
Wyoming's a pretty wild place too. I feel like I'm on a different planet when I'm in Wyoming. Like, and you couldn't think that the sky could get bigger, but for some reason the sky is bigger in Wyoming. I mean, it is vast.
That's one of the states I haven't been to. My goal is to hit all 50 states. Wyoming is one of those. I think a lot of the ones in the middle of the US I haven't been to because I haven't found anything or any reason to go there. So I got to get there eventually and try to see what's out there.
Wyoming would definitely be a state you'd probably just drive through.
Hmm.
I've been to Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is close to the border, and it's a very small city, but it was a nice place to stay. They actually say the weather stays pretty mild there. Have you been to the blah, blah, blah. Have you been to the Dakotas yet? Anywhere?
Yes, I've been to South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yes, because we one of our friends was getting married in Omaha, in Nebraska,
Mhm.
and so we were there for a week. And there's really not much to do in Omaha, so we're like, we got to rent a car. Let's just go to South Dakota. It's not that far because we wanted to go see Mount Rushmore.
Right.
So my sisters and I did that. And once again, I was the one driving while they slept in the car. And that was, I think that's the least fun of all my road trips because there's like um, cornfields, literally nothing else there when you're going between Nebraska and South Dakota. But once you get to like Grand Rapids
Hmm.
and stuff, then it's nice because there's the Badlands are there. And then, like I said, we went to go for Mount Rushmore.
Badlands. That is a cool place.
Yes.
And the way they kind of have it set up is like you park, and then
Mhm.
they're like, "All right, go ahead, walk wherever you want.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Don't
It's
fall
pretty
down."
cool. Now, Jeff Fernandez is saying hello to you.
Oh yes, he's from INCRadio, New Jersey,
Okay.
which is actually coming up after us.
Okay.
But actually, I took a road trip. Well, actually, I flew into New York because I was doing hiking in the northern part, and then that's a really nice road trip too. It was around October when the leaves are changing. So that's another road trip we're taking. The Adirondacks in New
Mhm.
York when the leaves are changing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, really, really good road trip. Yeah, Northeast. So I don't like cities at all, but the Northeast is really, really beautiful if you take road trips around
I've done that in the fall. I drove from, I want to say, was it New York, all the way up to Maine. So going through Connecticut, Vermont, and all that. I thought that was pretty too.
there. All right. We
Um,
also have Ron chiming in again. Pre-planning your road trips and mapping out your gas stops is important, especially here in Texas. We got some really good gas stops.
oh, yes, we
Um,
do.
that way, you're assured you'll always have gas to get to your destination. Always fill up before or at half tank. That is actually very good advice to give,
I'm bad
especially
at
out
that.
west.
I wait until the light comes on.
And you know, some cars it'll say empty and it'll keep going.
You have about 25 miles, they say. When the light comes on, they say you have about 25 miles.
Depends on the car. I had a
That-
car when it says zero, it is actually empty, and your car
no,
will
I'm
just
saying when the
die.
light goes on, not when it says zero.
Well, no, there's cars that when it's zero, it'll still keep going because it's like they kind of given that margin of error.
Yeah,
This was a German car, by the way, so I could see why the engineers would have been like, no, when it's zero, it's
it's
zero.
zero.
You
And
want to read another
yeah,
one?
one more. There's from Frankie Andres, and I think this is really good. If you're traveling with kids or toddlers, have some kind of portable potty trainer so that it's accessible. Because kids sometimes they can't hold it like adults can,
Right.
and so yeah, you need to really have something because kids gotta go.
And then we'll read the last one from Ederlin
Uh huh.
from Jacksonville, saying they drove 5,300 miles in a week. Texas, Arkansas, Kansas, Illinois, New York, Florida, and then Texas.
Wow. I don't know if I could do that.
Well, it is my goal one day to drive to the Arctic Ocean at the top of Alaska one day.
That's I drove to the North Pole.
You've driven to the
The
North Pole?
city of the North
Oh,
Pole in Alaska.
all right. All right, we'll close out with that. So we thank you for joining us today. We like to, of course, thank our CFO coordinator and SEBC president, Brother Angelo Arano Vimanalo, and our executive minister, Brother Eduardo Vimanalo. Be sure to tune in to INC Radio South Central States next week at 9 a.m., same time. I think we're going to do summer foods. And stay tuned to INC Radio New Jersey coming up next.
Now, isn't there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
We're out of time.
No, you got 2 minutes.
Oh, we got 2
You
minutes?
got 2 minutes.
All right, I'll shout out my son,
Just your son. What is your son's name?
Everest.
Now,
He's my road trip partner.
does he enjoy road trips?
I think it depends on where. At
Okay.
first, he was kind of apprehensive till he realized he can explore things.
Okay.
What about you? What's your final?
My shout out goes to my sisters. There's Cookie and there's Peachy and there's Eileen. And then my nephews, Riley, Mason, and Angelo. We're usually the road trip crew.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are we done now? All right, we'll go ahead and close out there. So, thank you for joining us here today on INC Radio South Central States. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Same
Have a good one.
time,
Yeah, same time.
different place.